settled. Good evening, everyone. I am Jack Warner. I am president of Rhode Island College, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this very important debate. I welcome our co-sponsors. I welcome the candidates. Good luck to all of you tonight. And I welcome you as the audience. We at RIC are very pleased to be hosting debates like this. It is an anchor principle. Anchor, I used not by accident. We are the anchor men here. It is an anchor principle of democracy that it relies on a highly educated population to function well, and more important than ever these days. So as an institution of higher education, we are more than pleased to host events like this. We know that our graduates participate in civic engagement at higher rates. The higher the education level, the higher the rates of those kinds of participation. So civic engagement is really important to us. It's important to our students and important to our graduates, and more importantly, important to the state of Rhode Island, which is our purpose to serve. So welcome to all of you. Enjoy the debate tonight, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Gotta wait for the time. Good evening and hello everyone. I'm Luis Hernandez, morning host at the Publix Radio. Welcome to our special live broadcast and digital stream of our candidate forum for Rhode Island's 2023 1st Congressional District Special Election, a partnership between the Providence Journal, the Publix Radio, Rhode Island PBS, and Rhode Island College. Because we have so many candidates involved, we're going to have to narrow our focus to a few very important issues. We're hoping that gives you a chance to get to know these candidates and to help you in deciding who you're going to vote for come September 5th. We've separated the candidates into two groups presented in reverse alphabetical order. Now, the candidates that we've invited to this forum all meet the criteria established by the media partners that include beyond meeting legal requirements for the ballot, but also demonstration of active campaigning and a show of constituent support. In this first hour, we're going to meet from these candidates. Let me introduce them to you. We have Aaron Regenberg, former 4th District Representative of Rhode Island House. Ana Quesada, Rhode Island State Senator, District 2. Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos. John Gonsalves, Providence City Councilman, 1st Ward. And Stephen Casey, member of the Rhode Island House District 50. Now, later this evening, we're going to hear from Don Carlson, Sandra Cano, Walter Burbrick, Stephanie Beauty, and Gabe Amo. We're coming to you live, before a live audience at Rhode Island College in Providence, and we're broadcasting on 89.3 FM. We're also streaming this event live, which you can pick up at theprovidencejournal.com. I'll be the host this evening, but our moderators are Ian Donis, political reporter of the Publix Radio, and Patrick Anderson, State House reporter for the Providence Journal. They'll be asking the questions and making sure the candidates stay on time.
Are serious threats to our democracy, and those democracies, democracy is so important, and we need to call that out. So the hate and extremism that we're experiencing domestically, the terrible anti-Semitism, the anti-Black and anti-gay rhetoric, we need to hold the line on our values. And look, that is not being polarizing. That is being inclusive, and that is making sure that we stand up for everyday people who live in Rhode Island. And let's just be frank, the MAGA Republicans are intent on ripping away our basic human rights. So that's not about being divisive. That's about being clear in our values and saying we stand for the people that we represent, and that's exactly what I would do should I be elected your next congressperson.
Sabina Matos, if you're the next member of Congress from CD1, what legislation would you introduce to get at this concern?
Well, I would support the For the People Act that has already been worked on, but democracy is very important to me. I have mentioned before, I grew up outside of this country. I came here when I was 20 years old without knowing the language, work in the factory and learn the language after work. And I have been able to serve in the city council and also serve as lieutenant governor and now running for Congress. This is something that would not happen in another country. I believe that only happens here in America. It's unique to America because of the strong democracy that we have. And we have to protect democracy. I'm worried every time that I see that in this country we're taking democracy for granted. And if we lose democracy, we lose faith in the institution, that's gonna destroy this country.
I'm sorry.
I believe that we have to do everything we can to protect the democracy that we have.
Ana Casada, same question for you.
Well, we can see this, that our countries divide. And not just our country, our party, both of them are divided. The Democrats, the Republicans, they are divided inside themselves. Then it's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think the hate, the discrimination, started when Donald Trump won the election.
Is there a bill you would introduce to address these concerns?
Yeah, division, the super, my thing is, sir, see, we don't do something about it, and we don't start working from the beginning, and started working as the United States, and we can break that division, they're growing every day in our country. We're going to continue having this problem. You watch TV, and you all hear about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump, and that is a problem. And see, we don't fix that, we're going to continue having this issue.
Thank you. Aaron Regenberg, same question for you.
We always need to be looking for opportunities to work with people we don't always agree with, to reach across the aisle, to move some specific legislation forward. I think there are opportunities to do that in Congress. But I also think we need to be very, very clear. The threat that Republicans pose in the 2024 election, I think, is an existential threat to our democracy. I mean, these are people, dozens and dozens and dozens of elected representatives who plotted a coup against our government, and the coup plotters are still sitting in Congress, despite what I would argue in the 14th Amendment says very clearly, if you've engaged in insurrection against the United States government, you can't maintain a public office. So I think we need to take this very, very seriously. That is not something that you can reach across the aisle. That is something we need to stand up and fight against. I also think we need to understand the way that the Republican takeover of our courts plays into this, right? It has been the Supreme Court that undermined the Voting Rights Act, that has at every turn been working to support Republican politicians, because the Republicans on the Supreme Court basically are politicians. And so I think, just as far as legislation, we need legislation to reform the Supreme Court, to push for court expansion, to have term limits for Supreme Court members, to require a supermajority.
That's time. We're going to go back to Patrick.
Two of the candidates on the stage were on the Providence City Council in 2020 after the killing of George Floyd, and called for a reduction in police spending. Sabina Matos and John Gonsalves were there. That didn't happen. Starting with Sabina Matos, do you still believe that's needed, or have you changed your view on defunding the police or reducing police spending?
I think we went through this last year when I was running, and I clarified and I said several times, I did not call for the defund of the police. My request was to dedicate funding for other programs that support the police, and that's what we did. We dedicated $200,000 for the GOLD Team, which is a program with family services that right alongside police officers, because we're asking the police to respond to everything, even for things that are not police-related matters. So that was my position, funding for programs that are supporting the police officers in the work that they do.
But funding for police actually increased in those next 2 years. Did you change your position on reducing the number of police?
If you look at my record, I voted for 10 budgets while I was in the city council, and every one of those budgets included funding for the police. There was never a defunding the police on that.
So you didn't mean to reduce it when you called for reducing it?
I did not call for reducing the police budget. What I did is I called for funding for other programs that work alongside the police, like the GOLD Team from Family Services, and that's what we did with the funding for that program.
John Gonsalves, you also said you weren't going to support the budget if it didn't include a reduction in police spending. What happened?
Yes, but the term defunding the police is a very, very divisive term. So my intent was always about making sure that we had resources to help behavioral services, to help people who were undergoing mental health crises. And we were able to push and advocate for that funding. Look, I was in the non-leadership at the time, and I can tell you we put a lot of pressure on the leadership, including council president, to make sure that we had resources in our budget allocated to address this very issue. But let me be very clear. As a local elected official, I understand probably better than anyone on this stage the kind of work that our police department does for our communities day in and day out to keep our communities safe. I have a great partnership with our local police department. We work really, really hard to keep our communities safe. Now, we need to have balance in that. I just was out at the graduation for our new recruits, and you hear about it from police officers themselves. They want to see more robust mechanisms in order for them to address violent crime in our city while freeing them up from doing the hard work that policing requires.
Thank you. Stephen Casey, what do you think about those calls for either defunding or reducing police spending back then?
I personally think I believe it was irresponsible at that time, and I believe that's also a problem with our politicians these days. All of a sudden, there's an issue, and we need to capitalize on it and get a little bit of press. To defund the police is not a reasonable commitment or process at that time. And since then, there have been measures that have taken place, police training to deal with issues, to deal with mental health issues, people with mental health issues, but also we've instituted body cameras in the state of Rhode Island for all the police departments. I think that protects the police themselves, and it also protects the people that they're dealing with. So I think these are responsible ways of doing things.
Thank you. And Mr. Regenberg, what do you think about whether we need more police or fewer police on the streets?
I don't think we should be reducing the police budget, but I think we should be honest with the place that the movement for Black Lives was coming from, a place of deep pain and trauma. And I think part of that has been seeing the disinvestment in our communities in so many other ways. You know, losing arts classes and music classes in our public schools, having public pools closed down. So I think it's not about disinvesting. It is about focusing on what are the resources our communities need. It's also what are the structures that we need to ensure that police, that our law enforcement officers are held to high standards. Right now, there's been a campaign in Rhode Island to get rid of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which is a state statute that makes it basically impossible for mayors, for police chiefs to hold law enforcement officers accountable when they do engage in conduct that is unacceptable, that undermines community trust in the police. And I think pushing for those kind of statutory changes that are going to allow for us to rebuild trust, allow for there to actually be high standards and accountability, that's something that we should be focused on, absolutely.
Thanks. And Anna Quezada, I believe you've been working on that Leo Board issue.
Well, I never believe reducing the money of the police is the issue. I think we just have to make police responsible for their behavior. If you do it wrong, you need to pay like anybody else. And that's what the Leo Board, the legislation that I was sponsored on the Senate for many years now. But I think we had great departments of police in the city, but I think police should not be over the law like anybody else is. And that's the thing, I'm responsible, and I believe police need to be responsible. And I'm very happy that we were able to pass the camera, because now we have more evidence when a police don't do the right things and don't behave at what is expecting from them to do.
Thank you. Ian.
My next question is, what policy do you propose to address the immigration crisis at the southern border of the U.S.? Let's start with Anna Quezada.
Well, it's many things. As somebody who came to this country as an immigrant many years ago from the Dominican Republic, I came to this country legally. But my husband came to this country undocumented, the same way many people is coming through the country. I really believe the United States need to increase working permit for people to come to this country, be able to work, and go back to their country. I was in Guatemala last year, and one of the things when I was talking to the Guatemala governor, they were saying they had 3,000 working permit for people to come to this country, work, and go back to their country. And I think we need to go back to that. I think people don't want to come to this country undocumented. People coming here to looking for a better opportunity. People are coming here because they're fleeing for climate change. People are coming here because they want a better future for their family. And what they need is an opportunity. I'm not saying everybody who come through there are good or bad, but most of the people are coming here looking for a better opportunity for themselves and their families.
Some ground here. Mr. Regenberg, how would you address the border crisis?
You know, my grandfather was born in Rosenberg, Germany in 1930 and became a refugee from the Holocaust. He came to this country in 1948. Most of his family didn't survive, and a big part of the reason was strict quotas on the number of Jews that countries would accept. When we're thinking about our asylum policy at the border, I think we need to be focused on the protection of human life. And I don't think that our current policy is prioritizing that. Our current policy is very similar to the policy that was designed by Stephen Miller under the Trump administration. And again, as Senator Quesada said, folks who are seeking asylum are doing so because they are in danger, because there's violence, because there's climate catastrophe that took away their home and their ability to survive. And I think that we need an asylum policy that is understanding that, is prioritizing, again, the protection of human life. That's something that, you know, I only am alive today because there was a policy like that that allowed my grandfather to survive.
Ms. Matos, how would you address the border crisis?
Thank you. As someone that, in order to come to this country, my family, my mother had to wait 10 years in the immigration process in order to come here, because for her to come sooner, believe it or not, she will have to get divorced in order to come here for her mother to do the petition, my grandmother, who's now 99 years old. So I understand the challenges, how broken the immigration system is. We have to wait 10 years to get here. There are people waiting many years to be able to legalize their documentation. What I believe we have to do right now, the Democratic Party unfortunately doesn't have control of the House, is the Republican. So we have to work with the Republicans that are willing to work on immigration reform. I know that there is a bill right now proposed by Representative Elvira Salazar, Maria Elvira Salazar from Florida. She's a Republican. It's not a perfect bill, but it's a beginning. And right now, they are the ones that are in control, so we have to work with them to get immigration reform done.
Mr. Casey?
The Statue of Liberty says, give us your tired, you're hungry, you're poor, and you're downtrodden. We are the melting pot. We should not refuse asylum to anybody who seeks it for whatever reason that their life is untenable wherever they are. I do believe that we need to have specific measures to keep people who can undermine the safety of the United States out of the United States. I think we need to have specific security measures to do that. But to refuse anyone asylum because they have an untenable situation is wrong.
Mr. Gonsalves.
So this issue is very personal to me. My mom immigrated to the United States in the 1980s, and both of her parents had died. And she raised us in a single-parent household, and as the son of immigrants, I think we need to do everything in our power to make sure that immigrants are treated with dignity and respect. It's why I support the American Dream and Promise Act. I also support the American Families United Act and the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act, which are pieces of federal legislation that would address this very issue. We need to treat people with dignity and respect. It's my story. When I was 12 years old, in fact, my mom would go around to every single event that Congressman Cicilline was having at the time to try to get me into a public school in Providence. And if it wasn't for his leadership and his intervention, my trajectory from Providence Public Schools to the Wheeler School to Brown University wouldn't have been the same. We have to treat our immigrants with dignity and respect.
Thank you, Mr.
And as your next
Gonsalves.
congressperson, I'll fight for that.
I'm going to try to get one more question in, so 45 seconds on this one, and we'll start with Mr. Gonsalves. Climate change, even if we agree big oil is responsible for climate change, what would you do to practically decarbonize our economy and push us towards decarbonization?
Sure. So practically, it's the work that I've been doing at the federal level. So we have been responsible for administering over $166 million in ARPA relief dollars here in the city of Providence. I'm actually proud of my legislation at the local level. So I was the lead sponsor on our right to charge law, which will allow us and enable us to leverage millions and millions in federal funds to address climate change. I was also the lead sponsor on our bill to try to expand composting citywide. And we're doing a lot of other important things in the city of Providence. But ultimately, we need to work towards addressing the most aggressive climate legislation, particularly at the federal level. It's why I've been on record, even as a local councilman, about the Green New Deal.
Thank you. That's 45 seconds.
Yes.
Stephen Casey, practical things that we can do to move towards wind, solar, whatever, decarbonization.
Well, practical things right now include grid upgrades, which is going to probably take some federal legislation, because right now I don't believe that the grid can handle what we're trying to do. We have states that are currently enrolling brownouts on a constant level, and I think that's unacceptable. And when we talk about wind and solar, I'm all for it. I'm all for the environment, but we need to look at failure rates of turbines. We need to look at other issues. I think we need to look at other opportunities. And I don't believe that we need to give up completely on fossil fuels. I believe that we cannot give up on technology. We need to create different ways for new energy.
Sabina Matos, what would you do?
Thank you. I believe that the Inflation Reduction Act include a lot of good parts of that were originally in the Green New Deal that are helping to address this challenge. Some of the things that we have been doing here locally in the state of Rhode Island, we have been leading in the offshore wind development. We need to continue that. We also need to continue to incentivize the individuals and corporations to move from to electric vehicles and provide incentives and rebates. So that's some of the steps we have to take, but I always worry about what is the planet that we're leaving to the next generation, to my kids. And I think we have to take the steps to help address that. And Rhode Island, honestly, has been leading in this space.
Anna Kazada, specific things.
Well, climate change is a big deal for everybody, and we are very concerned because without a planet, we're not going to have no, if we don't have a planet, we don't have no problems. But one of the things is Green New Deal Act would be a good thing. It would bring group pay jobs to the state. It will build, we need to move from gasoline car to electric cars. And I think to educate people about it, because so many people think they are too expensive and some people can afford and some other not. I think bringing more money to give the opportunity to people of color to be able to afford to buy those kind of cars, I think it would be a great thing. And to put panel solar on the house, it would be another thing for us to be able to prevent, to get better our climate change.
And Aaron Regenberg, specific actions.
This is an existential threat for our civilization. July was the hottest month we've had on this planet in 125,000 years. Just last week there was a tornado in Rhode Island that lifted a car 10 feet off the ground. This is the work I've been doing for years as an organizer, working to block pollution in our communities, as a state legislator, creating new clean energy programs for our state, and as a new climate lawyer, supporting the court cases to hold big oil accountable for their environmental crimes. We need to end federal subsidies for oil and gas. We need to block the continued expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to continue funding a Green New Deal to create millions of good-paying union jobs doing that decarbonization work. I'm really proud to be the only candidate in this campaign that's been endorsed by climate and environmental organizations, local organizations like Climate Action Rhode Island, national organizations like Food and Water Watch and Friends of the Earth.
Should we make carbon, gas, and oil more expensive to speed that up?
So when I was a state legislator, every year that I was in the State House,
Yes or no? We're running out of time, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, I introduced legislation creating a state-level carbon pricing program that would protect consumers.
Is that a yes or no?
Yes, in ways that protect consumers.
Are we saying we're raising taxes, essentially? Is that what we're saying?
The price of carbon, but we're now out of time and on to the next section.
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll jump in for a second here, and that's great question, and we'll have to stop for a moment. Maybe you can get back to it. I just wanted to pause for a moment here to remind everybody that you're listening to a special live broadcast and digital stream of the 2023 Special Election Forum. Again, this is a partnership between the Providence Journal, the Public Radio, Rhode Island PBS, and Rhode Island College. We are broadcasting live from Rhode Island College on 89.3 FM, and we are streaming at theprovidencejournal.com. Now, we're going to move forward to the rapid fire segment. We're looking for brief, very brief answers, yes or no in some cases.
We'll try.
Again, limited time. Ian and Patrick will interrupt you if you have to. I'm going to turn it over now. Ian, you're going to kick us off with the first question.
Candidates, I'm looking for yes or no answers. I'm going to ask 4 questions. We're going to then go to Patrick. I'm going to take turns alternating from each end of the table. Let's start with Stephen Casey. Do you support lowering the voting age to 16?
No.
John Gonsalves.
No.
Sabina Matos.
No.
Ana Quezada.
No.
Aaron Regenberg.
Yeah.
Aaron Regenberg, should the United States provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine right now?
I would defer to the president on that.
Ana Quezada.
Well, I think the president is doing a good job on that.
Sabina Matos.
We have to provide Ukraine everything that they ask us for.
John Gonsalves.
I would also defer to the president.
I think we need to provide anything we can to reduce this conflict and get it over with.
Stephen Casey, if you're not the victor on September 5th, will you run again for this congressional seat next year?
I'm going to be the victor.
John, hold your applause, please. We have limited time. John Gonsalves, how about you?
No.
Sabina Matos.
No.
Ana Quezada.
No.
Aaron Regenberg.
No.
And Ms. Matos held a news conference today in which she encouraged other candidates other than Aaron Regenberg to drop out of the race or think about it and throw their support to her. Mr. Regenberg, is there any chance that you will do that?
No, I think that this is, I think the lieutenant governor said this is a 2-person race. I think this is a 12-person race. I think there's a bunch of worthy, impressive candidates that I feel honored to be running alongside.
Ana Quezada, any chance that you drop out before September 5th?
No.
John Gonsalves, any chance you drop out before September 5th?
No one gave one-word answers to this, so I'm just going to say that, look, we've raised over $150,000 in this campaign.
Briefly,
Grassroots
please,
support,
Mr. Gonsalves.
no super PAC money. We are powered by the people. We are for the people, and we're staying in this race.
Stephen Casey.
I will not drop out of this race.
And Ms. Matos, I don't want to leave you out. Is the fact that you're asking other candidates to drop out, is this a sign of weakness for your campaign?
I'm not going to be dropping out of the race. Is that the question you're asking me, like everybody else? No, actually, the question that what I said during the press conference is, if anybody drop out of the race, I would be the first one calling, then asking them for the support. Yeah.
And we'll start at the other end. Stephen Casey, would this campaign be better if we were using ranked choice voting? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. Ranked choice voting is a terrible concept.
John Gonsalves.
Is this a one-word answer?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Or no? Sabina Matos.
I will be in support of ranked choice.
Ana Quezada.
Me too. I think it would be better for this campaign.
Aaron Regenberg.
Longtime supporter of ranked choice voting.
Starting with Aaron Regenberg, should the U.S. ban TikTok? Yes or no?
That's a question I need to do more research on. I have a lot of concerns about the mental health impact of social media on our young people. I think we need to do a lot more regulation of social media.
Ana Quezada.
I have to agree with that. I think we need to do more things, especially for the youngers and teenagers that they sometimes get, used in the mental health. Sometimes they get victimized by this TikTok.
Sabina Matos, should we ban it?
My daughter's in the room. I have to say no. No, definitely. I'm concerned with how addicted it is, but right now I'm not ready to say that we should ban it.
So as a teacher, I'm also worried about the mental health implications, but I'm going to say no and follow us at John G. PVD if you're out there.
And Stephen Casey.
Thank you. I do not believe it should be banned only because this becomes an issue of censorship. And yeah, we may need to have some discussions about it, but to just outright censor any outlet, any media outlet.
And yes or no answers will start with you. Should the U.S. move to single-payer health care? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
John Gonsalves,
Absolutely.
Sabina Matos.
Yes.
Yes.
Aaron.
Absolutely, that's why I introduce the legislation every year I was in the State House.
And also, yes or no, starting with Mr. Riegenberg, should the federal government cut funding from states that don't build new affordable housing?
I think,
Yes or no?
I think the federal government should be making massive investments in affordable
Should they
housing.
cut if there is no production in localities and states?
No, I think we should be investing.
Anna Quezada.
We need to invest more on affordable housing
no
and
sticks.
low-income housing.
Sabina Matos.
We shouldn't cut the funding because there's still people that need housing in those states.
John Gonsalves.
No hesitation, we should spur more affordable housing, just the bottom line. So
Stephen Casey.
I don't believe we need to cut, no.
And that, are we back to?
All right, I can run with it.
Yeah.
Stephen Casey, do you support statehood for Washington, D.C.?
No.
John Gonsalves?
yes.
Sabina Matos?
Yes.
Ana Quezada?
Yes.
Aaron Regenberg?
Absolutely.
Aaron Regenberg, what letter grade would you give to Governor McKee for his job performance?
We've got a bit of a history. I've had a lot of concerns recently. I'd give him a D+.
Ana Quezada?
It's a hard question. I think it's too soon for us to give him a bad credit, but I think he can do better.
Sabina Matos?
I think the job is not done yet, so I cannot give him a greater grade. I think right now he's still doing the work.
John Gonsalves?
I'd also give him an incomplete.
Stephen Casey?
If we're talking about a grading system as in school report cards, I think a B right now, but he's got room for improvement.
Stephen Casey, what is the last book that you've read?
Oh, Lord. I can't remember.
How about a favorite book?
I've been too busy serving the legislature for 65 hours a week and being a fireman for 48 hours
Name
a
a
week.
favorite book.
My favorite book? Oh, I'd have to say How to Win Friends and Influence People.
John Gonsalves, your most recently read book.
Well, I read multiple books at the same time, so Sapiens and Start With Why.
Sabina Matos?
I have several, but the one that I think has given me pause and a lot to think about is called Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know.
Ana Quezada?
The Dream of My Father for Barack Obama.
Aaron Regenberg?
I've got an old copy of The Grapes of Wrath from high school that I take out when I need to have some comfort, and during this campaign, I've been reading that.
And one more from me before we go back to Patrick. Aaron Regenberg, did President Biden and his administration move too slowly in responding to inflation?
I think the president should have been clearer about that inflation is coming from corporate price gouging. I think that the Fed's response to inflation, where they're putting the entire burden on low-income people, on workers, has been egregious and immoral.
Thank you. Ana Quezada?
Yes, I think he did, but I think we need to make big corporations responsible for that too.
Sabina Matos?
I think the president has been doing a really good work on addressing inflation, whatever is under his control.
John Gonsalves?
Yes, he was too slow. The income inequality that we're experiencing in our country is devastating. We need to address this issue faster.
Stephen Casey?
I believe he could have moved faster, yes.
And we'll start back, back to Stephen Casey. If elected to the office, what foreign country would be the first that you would visit in your official capacity as congressman?
I think I'd like to go to Ireland.
John Gonsalves.
I would like to go to Portugal.
Sabina Matos.
Israel?
Israel. Oh, I should have said that too. Sorry.
Anna Quezada.
And to be honest, that's one of the countries that I would love to see first because of the issue they're having in Israel.
Any others? If that one's taken, what's your next choice?
Can we go on a trip
Switzerland?
together?
I would love to go to Switzerland because I think they have one of the best gun controls. And I would like to learn more about it, especially with all the gun problem that we're having in this country.
Aaron Regenberg, foreign trip?
I wouldn't do this during the campaign, but if I were elected, I'd like to go to Ukraine to see the actual reality on the ground.
And And then we'll continue lightning round with Aaron. Do you think the United States would benefit from more nuclear power in its decarbonization effort or less?
So I think that, I definitely don't think that we should be taking any current nuclear power plants offline. I also think that nuclear power plants are, in general, incredibly expensive and take a very long time to create new ones and bring them online. And we already have wind, solar, geothermal.
Status quo, keeping,
I think we should focus on wind, solar, geothermal, which are more efficient, cheaper, and we already have the technology.
Anna Kazada, more nuclear, same or less?
I would say less.
Sabina
I
Matos?
would say stay the same, but we need to find alternative energy sources, so I'm open to exploring. But for now, staying the same.
John Gonsalves?
I would say less, there are alternative forms of energy.
And Stephen Casey?
I would
more or
advocate for more nuclear power. This is clean energy.
less? And we'll start back with Stephen Casey. Should we restore the salt tax deduction, the federal level? Yes or no? Was that a yes?
Yes.
John Gonsalves?
No.
Sabina Matos?
No.
Anna Kazada?
No.
And Aaron Regenberg?
No.
And
We've got a little bit of extra time in this segment, so I'm going to go to a more open-ended question. Please confine your answers to 45 seconds. There's a lot of overlap between all of you on issues. Mr. Casey is less liberal, but even he said recently that it was a mistake for him to vote against Rhode Island's abortion protection law in 2019, so you're all close on the abortion issue. What difference does it make who wins this in terms of what is at stake in this race? And let's start with Mr. Casey.
I think what's at stake here is trust. I think people need somebody that they can trust. And with the issue with, some people have said there's a flip-flop regarding abortion issues, but what the case is that at heart, I am a constitutionalist. I believe that people have fought and died for our rights under the Constitution. They wrote a check, our service people wrote a check up to and including their lives to defend our rights under the Constitution. And I will protect a woman's right to have an abortion under the Constitution. I am pro-life. Let's not make a mistake about it. But I expect...
Thank you, Mr. Casey. That's time. John Gonsalves, what's at stake in this election?
I think what's at stake in this election is making sure that we have a representative that puts people first. I think, you hear a lot about the super PAC money, the big money flowing into this election, and quite frankly, we are the campaign that's not taking that kind of money. So I hope that I can offer an alternative. But the other piece is lived experience. I grew up in the city of Providence. I've spent probably more time as a kid in the city of Providence than anybody else on this stage. But the reason why I fight so hard is because I grew up in poverty. I know what it means to go to bed hungry, and I know what it feels like to be discriminated because of the color of my skin. And I would say second, I'm a teacher. I'm an elementary school teacher, and I've been a teacher for nearly the last decade, but a very effective legislator at the local level. And I'm running because of the fact that I have to teach my kids, my fourth graders, about active shooter drills instead of teaching them about multiplication and division.
Thank you, Mr. Gonsalves. That's time. Ms. Matos, there's a lot of overlap between you and Mr. Regenberg on the issues. What difference does it make whether either one of you or someone else wins this election?
So there's a lot of stake in this election: democracy, women's right to choose, gun safety legislation, and representation. Those are part of the things that are on the ballot on this election in September. There's many different things between me and Mr. Regenberg. One of them is my experience. I have the experience of being elected office for more than 10 years at the local level, the Providence City Council, being the president of the Providence City Council, serving as lieutenant governor of the whole state of Rhode Island for the past 2 years. Bringing that experience to Washington, I'm the most qualified candidate in this table that can represent the people of Rhode Island and advocate for the people of Rhode Island because I do have the experience of getting things done.
Mr. Regenberg, what difference does it make who wins this election on September 5th?
This is a district that can support, I think, more than just one more Democratic vote. Our community can support someone who is going to be an organizer up there, someone who can marshal Democrats to stand up and fight against the Republican attacks on our rights and democracy. Someone who's going to push the Democratic Party when necessary to be the best version of itself that it can be. That's the work that I've been doing here in Rhode Island for many years. I think that's why we've been endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the caucus that David Cicilline helped to lead. That's why we've been endorsed by U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, who's actually going to be here in Providence this Sunday at the Columbus Theater in Providence. Doors open at noon if anyone wants to join. You know, I've actually have a record in this race of having stood up to big pharma and health insurance giants to push for Medicare for all, of taking on big oil to win real climate action. That's the kind of work that I think we need to be doing in Washington.
Thank you. Anna Quezada, what is at stake in this election?
It's many things. I think we need to send a regular Rhode Island, somebody who worked hard for everything I had in my life. I was a welfare mom. I was somebody who worked in the factory most of my life. I think it would be somebody, if somebody in here passed legislation, that would be me. I'm somebody who do not say what I'm going to do. And one of the things that we need to send a woman of color to Congress, but somebody with experience, not somebody who said she's the best one over here, but she never passed a legislation in her life. Then it's just somebody who's going to be doing the work for hardworking families in Rhode Island. And that would be me. I know what it is to be at a welfare office. I know what it is to be in the factory floor for many years. I'm somebody who went to college late in my life. I'm a regular Rhode Island who work hard and will fight for hard-working family in Rhode Island.
Thank you.
My turn. I was asking that question. All right. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all the candidates for taking the time to share with us and letting the voters know who you are. Our first hour now comes to a close. I would like to thank the candidates in group one.
We do need to do closing statement. Sorry, yes, we are.
Okay,
Yes.
see, that's what I was, okay. My apologies. My apologies. That's why I sent you a note. All right. Instead, we're going to do our closing statements. That's what I thought was happening. Let's do this. And my apologies. It's time for the closing statements from each of the candidates. You have 60 seconds. And
Starting with
you're going to start with?
Anna Quezada's first
Go
60
for it.
seconds closing statement.
My closing statement is, don't let Washington to come here. Let's take Washington to Rhode Island. Let's take Rhode Island to Washington. Let's make sure that big money don't buy our seat. Let's make sure this is not about us. This is about you. You are the one who's going to select who's going to be your state representative on September 5th. And I'm asking you to vote for Senator Quezada because I'm somebody who for the last 8 years been represented one of the poorer neighborhoods in this district, somebody who worked hard, who passed the minimum wage, who passed the DULA legislation, who passed many, many legislation who affect working family. And that's what I would do in Washington. I will fight for you. I will work hard every single day. I'm ready because I'm part of the legislation in here for years. And it's not the same, but it's very similar. I can guarantee you, if you send me to Washington, I will fight for you. I will work hard every single day in my life.
Thank you. Aaron Reberg, 60 seconds closing statement.
You know, for years, we've been, I think, really lucky to be represented by a real progressive champion, right? David Cicilline was more than just one more Democratic vote, right? He was a leader in taking the fight to Republicans, standing up to their attacks. He had the courage to actually stand up to the biggest corporations in the world. You know, I'm running for Congress because I think we need more of that kind of advocacy in Washington. That's the work I've been doing here in Rhode Island for years, as a community organizer, supporting young people to make change in our public schools, as a state legislator, building coalitions to pass paid sick days for 100,000 Rhode Islanders, to create the first increase in the minimum wage in our state in 20 years, to create new clean energy programs to lower costs and win a cleaner future. You know, in the next 2 weeks, my opponents are going to be coming after me for whatever attacks they can think of. But anyone who's pushed hard for change knows that comes with the territory. I know that together we can build an economy that works for everyone, a government that works for everyone. We can win a future that is livable for our kids. I'm excited to get to work, and I'm honored to ask for your support on September 5th.
Sabina Matos, 60 seconds, closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. In this election on September 5th, and since last Wednesday, because we have early voting already happening, what is on the ballot is democracy. I remember watching the news on January 6th, and I couldn't believe that the images that I thought were here in the United States. That is on the ballot. A woman's right to choose. If you look at the news right now, just last week, there was another legislation, another ruling that came from the courts. It gets prohibiting abortion by mail, and that is on the ballot. Gun safety legislation to make sure that we remove assault weapons from our street. That is on the ballot. Representation, making sure that the state of Rhode Island have the representation of a female voice and the federal delegation. That is on the ballot. Social Security and Medicare protections to make sure that people like my parents and my grandmother, who's 99 years old, has a protection for their Social Security so they can pay for their medication and their housing. That is on the ballot.
Thank
and
you.
I ask you to vote for me.
That's time. And Stephen Casey, 60 seconds, closing statement.
Thank you. Rhode Islanders want a congressman that they can trust. I'm running for Congress because I believe you folks can trust me. As an Eagle Scout and a Freemason, the tenets of these organizations are based on trust and loyalty. You also need a leader in the State House, and for 10 years I've been serving at the State House in leadership roles. Nobody at this table and nobody in the green room has the experience that I have. As a firefighter, I believe I've seen and I understand the struggles that people go through, and I've been endorsed by every public safety union in the state of Rhode Island. Finally, I think it's unique, if not historic, that given my union status, I'm now backed by the business community here in Rhode Island because I have a very strong view of how things need to be. Look around. I believe you folks can trust me. I think you're looking for a leader. I'm that leader. I'm Stephen Casey, and I'm running for Congress. I expect and would like your vote. Please, go vote, and I ask you to vote for me September 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, and John Gonsalves, closing statement.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you to my colleagues for a substantive discussion tonight. My name is John Gonsalves, and I'm a second-term city councilman representing the east side and downtown in the city of Providence, and I've got a track record of delivering real results for our constituents. I'm also a fourth-grade teacher at the Wheeler School and have been a teacher for nearly the last decade. I'm running for Congress to put people first. I was born here in Rhode Island to a single mother, and despite growing up in poverty, I was able to go from Providence Public Schools to Brown University. But let's face it, Washington isn't working for us. The economy is doing good for the pharmaceutical industry. It's not just doing good for our seniors trying to fill their prescriptions. It's doing good for the big oil and gun lobby, but it's hampering the ability of my fourth graders to have a bright future that's not ravaged by our climate crisis or gun violence. I'm running because I believe in a future where everyone, not just the rich and the privileged, have a fair shot. So please join me at John G. for Congress, and please send this teacher to Congress.
Thank you. It's time.
All right, now we're done. All right. I want to thank our candidates, Aaron Regenberg, Ana Quesada, Sabina Matos, John Gonsalves, and Stephen Casey. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. And thank you again to our audience, to our community members who submitted questions. Again, you're listening to a special live broadcast and digital stream of the 2023 Special Election Forum, a partnership between the Providence Journal, the Public's Radio, Rhode Island PBS, and Rhode Island College. We are broadcasting live from Rhode Island College on 89.3 FM, streaming live at theprovidencejournal.com. We're going to take a quick break here and get our second group of Democratic candidates in momentarily. Okay. Well, hold on. What is it? Tell me what is it? No, no, no. I understand that. That's fine. But they're on the radio. We're not running something else. No, okay. So, okay. But what do you want them to talk about? How do we do this?
You don't have something that you want to talk about now, I'm not gonna.
No. I honestly
It's
thought.
just dead air, it's effectively dead air on your lives.
Well,
All right, BBS can edit it.
I mean, I thought we discussed this. I thought that there was nothing. Yeah, no. I thought that there was. We were just going to bring this group in. A couple of minutes. That's what I'm going to do.
Not for us, we're fine.
No, I know. I know what you're saying.
Very interesting.
Thank you. I
We had about 7 extra minutes at the end of the lightning round, so Patrick and I think it made sense to plug like 7 minutes more into the first segment. Because, yes. What's that? Okay. The lightning round takes less time than we had.
right.
So we can put about 7 minutes more in the first segment.
Yeah.
Roughly one more question in the first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just give me the signal when you're done. I'm following you anyway. When I'll get up and give that first break, and then maybe round off and the fast speed run. Okay, that's fine. And then now with the closing statements, do you want me to use that? Is that your name on it?
I'll do it, that's why I got,
That's okay. That's all right. No worries.
it was,
No worries.
without being able to talk, it is those, so it'll be Ian this, it'll be Ian this time.
Yeah.
Someone has to press.
This is the 30 seconds out.
Looks like it, yeah. So I might come up here with the paper.
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, thank you so much for being here. I'm Luis Hernandez, host of the morning show on the Publix Radio. Welcome back to the special live broadcast and digital stream of our candidate forum for the Rhode Island's 2023 First Congressional District Special Election. This is a partnership between the Providence Journal, the Publix Radio, Rhode Island PBS, and Rhode Island College. Let's now meet the second group of candidates. First, Jamestown businessman Don Carlson. You can go ahead and give a round of applause if you like.
Thank you.
Sandro Cano, Rhode Island Senator in District 8. Veteran Walter Burbrick of Middletown. Stephanie Beauty, who ran last year for Secretary of State. And Gabe Amo, former Deputy Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Again, we're coming to you live before a live audience at Rhode Island College in Providence, broadcasting on 89.3 FM. This is also streaming live on the providencejournal.com. I will be the host tonight. I'm joined on the stage by our political reporter at the Publix Radio, Ian Donis, and the State House reporter for the Providence Journal, Patrick Anderson. They will be asking the questions and keeping track of time. Just a couple of reminders to the audience again. Please be respectful of the candidates. Hold your applause until the end, because this will take time away from them. I didn't see any issues with signs, but if you do have any, please don't put them up. Let's wait until the very end to share our applause for the candidates and for sharing their time tonight. Candidates, again, this is not a formal debate. We're not going to be giving you time for formal rebuttals. We're looking for a lively discussion. We have a lot of ground to cover, very little time. The first round of questions, we're asking to keep your answer at a minute. As the candidates in the first group, please do not attack each other, especially candidates from the other group who cannot defend themselves. This is your time to introduce yourself to the voters, whether on the radio, live stream, or here in our audience. So I'm going to turn things over now to Ian or Patrick. They're going to, again, interrupt if you don't answer the question. They're going to keep you on time, but I'm going to pass it over to Ian, who asked the first question.
Candidates, good evening. It probably hasn't escaped your attention that we're coming up on a presidential election next year. Don Carlson, let's start with you. What is the biggest mistake that President Biden has made in the White House?
There's only one thing I can think that I disagree with him on, and that is sending cluster munitions to Ukraine, because I believe that's, it's forbidden under international law. And even though we're not a signatory to that treaty, I think we should have respected international law. Other than that, I think President Biden's doing a really great job. I think it's amazing that we're coming into a soft landing instead of a recession right now. Inflation is back under control. Unemployment is down and going lower. I think he's doing a fantastic job, and I think he's brought dignity and decency back to our government. And I'm super grateful for that.
Sandra Cano, what has President Biden's biggest mistake been?
So I am a supporter of President Biden, and in fact was a delegate for him in 2020. And I would say that right now we are under a climate crisis that is very urgent, and it brings a lot of chaos into our lives. And I just feel that last week there was a devastating fires in Maui, in Hawaii, and I felt that he took a little time to respond to that crisis. I love the fact that he was visiting there yesterday, but he could have done more prompt response because the people of Hawaii really needed that reassurance that we were going to help them during this crisis.
Same question for you, Walter Burbrick.
Yeah, for me, it boils down to leadership, and I think your comment on the cluster munitions is interesting, but it's such a hard decision. It's such a hard decision because the Ukrainian people are clawing and fighting for their lives, and they need anything and everything that they can get their hands on to defeat the Russian threat. And so I respect your opinion, but at the same time, they're fighting for their lives. But I think the one thing I do disagree with is his decision to allow oil drilling in the Arctic off of Alaska. I've been to the Alaskan slope. I know the economy relies significantly on oil, but at the same time, we've got to think strategic and smart about reducing our reliance on oil.
Stephanie Beauty, President Biden's biggest mistake.
I think Honestly, I mean, there's a lot that I agree with that has been stated, but as far as immigration and what that's been doing to our borders, I think that that's devastating to see. We've seen what other parties have used that to leverage as part of their ammunition, and I think that we needed to do our due diligence in that. I don't think either the president or the vice president has responded, in my opinion, adequately to that, and there has been no solution that's been presented. In my opinion, it's been ignored and used as a political basis to weaponize on both sides.
Gabe Amo, you of course worked in the White House under President Biden. What did the boss or former boss get wrong?
Well, of course, I'm a little biased, but what I would say is I truly believe, and I hear it from Rhode Islanders often, that we need a broader national effort on dealing with our housing crisis. And you all might know that as part of the president's Build Back Better agenda, which ultimately became the big Inflation Reduction Act, we didn't really have any substantial investments in housing that could have been transformative in the same way that we made investments to fight the climate crisis in a historic way, address the issues with pharmaceutical drug costs, and so much more. So, I was there. I spoke with a lot of mayors and local leaders across the country, and that was something that hurt a lot of communities across the country.
We're going to go to a question from Patrick Anderson.
Thank you, Ian. We'll start with Mr. Amo on this one. A lot of the candidates in this race have said that they want to reduce the size of the defense budget and the amount of military spending. To do that, would you sacrifice some of the money that goes to Electric Boat, one of the region's largest employers, if it could reduce spending on the in defense on a bigger picture scale?
Well, I think one of the primary roles of a congressperson is to protect Rhode Islanders, and protecting Rhode Islanders includes protecting Rhode Island jobs. So I would look very hard for other options, but I cannot, in good conscience, sacrifice the jobs that Rhode Island families depend on. We know how difficult the economy can be for so many, and I would work really diligently to make sure that was an absolute last resort, and I would not proceed down that road if it was right in front of me.
Do you want to reduce military spending in general, even aside from Electric Boat?
I think it's a complicated question that I think we have to dig in deeper to, because ultimately we know that the world is fairly unstable right now, from China to Ukraine to so many conflicts that are on the horizon, not even taking into account things like cyber warfare. So I think it's probably not prudent at this moment to pursue drastic cuts. We need to weed out fraud, waste, and abuse, and that's where I'd focus.
Ms. Beauty, do you want to reduce defense spending, and would you sacrifice some money to Electric Boat to do that?
So I echo with some of the statements that my colleague has shared here, but when I think it has to be an if and or statement. So if by cutting this budget that I create way more jobs than what Electric Boat has, then I see an added benefit there, right? And what type of jobs those could be. But would I cut jobs from Electric Boat just for the sake of cutting a budget? No, absolutely not. So that's why I say an if and then statement. So if by reducing 10 jobs from Electric Boat, but then you create, I don't know, astronomically 500 new jobs in clean energy or building and housing infrastructure, I think that that's an opportunity to kind of reassess our skill set, and we do it all the time in companies when we realign our teams. As far as the issue for cybersecurity, cyber risk, we haven't invested in those areas, to be quite honest, and those have been severely underfunded. And so that's why I say it's an if and then statement, because we might be able to create new opportunities that Electric Boat might not necessarily build submarines, but have, as we're looking at Rhode Island College, to have a cyber risk and cybersecurity center here, that could be an opportunity to leverage new jobs here in Rhode Island.
Thank you. Mr. Burbrick, do you want to reduce military spending, and would you would you even consider Electric Boat to do it?
Yes, but not at the expense, and here's why. I spent the last 2 decades in our defense and focusing on prioritizing, identifying threats to our homeland and to our interests overseas. And one of both in the cyber domain, space, in the air, on land, and at sea. And one of the greatest threats to our country today is in the undersea domain, and by countries like China, like Russia, who are continuing to increase their capabilities. And so yes, jobs are very important, but the safety and security of the American people are come above and beyond. And that's why we need to make sure that we not only sharpen but maintain our edge and our military edge in the undersea domain. And so that's why it's so critical that we not only maintain it but strengthen it. If I were in Congress right now, I'd be one of two folks in Congress who would actually vote against the NDA, because it doesn't address the long-term pacing threat of China. It doesn't address the most urgent threat right now today, and that's Russia. And so I would be for reducing the defense budget by 10% so that we can invest in things like housing, things like education, things like childcare, the things that are really going to define whether or not we remain an economic superpower, and the things that are going to define whether or not we outpace and outcompete China.
Thank you. And Ms. Cano.
So we need to have a strong military, and with a $6.27 trillion national budget, there is no reason why we need to have a reduction on our military and also taking care of the American people. I think we could do both. What we need to do is making sure that we take care and spend smart our dollars. And I think that we need someone that has the diligence to know that there is price gouging in our military. I am committed to protect the jobs in Rhode Island. And that's what I have done already as a state legislator, as a member of the Finance Committee. I see how important it is to invest in a smart way and to be able to take care also of social programs. So we can do both with a $6.27 trillion budget in the United States. So that's what I will do if elected to Congress.
Should we try to cut that spending, given the size of it, in the defense budget?
I think what we can, we need to protect our military, because the American people need protection with our troops. But what we need to do is make sure that that is spending and that investment that we do to the military is adequately accountable for making sure that we don't spend as much money in private gouging in things that could be spending smartly.
Thank you. And Mr. Carlson, should we cut the military spending budget?
Absolutely, we should cut the budget. I'm surprised to hear that there are actually Democratic candidates running for Congress who don't want to cut the defense budget. And I think it's important that voters highlight that as we go through. And Gabe's been consistent on that. He said that in a debate last week as well, that we should not cut the defense budget. We spend a lot too much on defense. But let me answer the submarines part of it. I would not cut the submarines and electric boat. And the reason is partly because of Rhode Island jobs, because I'm a Rhode Island congressman, but also because submarines are one of the more stabilizing weapons systems on the face of the planet. And Walter did a good job of explaining how we need to maintain undersea dominance. And I think that's a really important part of our national defense. So I wouldn't want to cut that. But let's face it, what is the biggest threat to our national security coming forward? It's climate change, because we're going to see masses of people that are dislocated, populations displaced, people roaming the world as refugees, food crises all over the world. That's what we can see in the next 15 or 20 years as a result of climate change. So we should take 10% of the defense budget and move it into a war on fossil fuels, and moving away from fossil fuels and moving into renewable energy. That creates jobs, it creates opportunity.
And if a congressman from Texas says the condition of that deal is you cut some of the electric boat budget, what do you say?
No deal.
Okay,
no deal, because that would be destabilizing for the world. But it's exciting to create new opportunity and create new jobs in a new industry that can really flourish and become the new economic engine for Rhode Island's future.
Thank you. Ian.
A report earlier this year by Democratic strategists found that the Democratic brand is very damaged in working-class communities hard hit by deindustrialization in states like Ohio and Michigan. I don't have to tell you those states are vital to Democratic hopes of keeping the White House. Stephanie Beauty, what policies would you support to reverse the erosion of working-class support for the Democratic Party?
I think that's a great question. I would really like to see us, especially being in Rhode Island, invest in our blue economy. Although we're talking about, our industries, when we look at Rhode Island and being able to create new jobs and being able to sustain that, I think that really in reinvesting our target here into the blue economy, and then making sure that we're actually competitive in the market. Creating new jobs for folks like Ohio is a concern, of course, but for me as a congressional candidate for Rhode Island, my concern will be to make sure that my constituents here in Rhode Island have newer jobs, we are innovative, and we are at top market so that we can be competitive with the rest of the world. And that's my priority.
Gabe Amo, how would you reverse the erosion of working class support for Democrats?
I would focus on two things. One is the work that we've done at the national level to invest in the supply chains of the future. when people make things, when people feel that dignity of work and feel like their government is supporting them along the way, that makes a huge difference. We have seen so many great investments from the Biden administration, but people aren't feeling them. And the reason they're not feeling them is because they're not part of them. And so we need to make sure that we expand the opportunities and bring them to all parts of the country. The second thing I'd focus on is our care economy. It's so critical that from protecting Social Security and investing in Medicare to also making sure that folks who are caregivers, whether it's elder care or child care, feel like everybody can be part of the economy. We know that women bear the burden of those responsibilities so often. That is another way to be accessible and create opportunity for all. So I think the disconnect. Yes.
Don Carlson, Donald Trump clobbered Hillary Clinton in the town of Johnston, not far from here in 2016. How do you bring back those Democrats?
The working class Democrats you're asking about. Yeah, I think the way you do it is you reinvigorate U.S. production. And again, I think the first big step on that, and I agree with Gabe on this, is some of the work Biden has done. The chip, bringing back semiconductor manufacturing in States, that'll create a lot of really high-end, great jobs, and that's billions, tens of billions of dollars of investment. And the Inflation Reduction Act. So that provides a 10% credit if you make new renewable energy projects with domestic materials, so domestic steel, domestic solar panels. And I was just talking to the folks who are doing some of the offshore wind projects here, and they told me that they really want that 10% credit for building those projects, but they can't find enough steel in the United States. So what we really need to do is to provide financing to rebuild America's steel manufacturing. And that would answer those people in Ohio and all those places out west. I'm not sure about Johnston, but it would be a good start. And by reshoring American production, we can rebuild those jobs.
How about you, Sandra Cano?
So I have already based all my policies on making sure that working families have a voice as the current job that I have as a state senator. Those policies really compense from making sure that we take care of our child care system, making sure that mothers and families don't have to choose between sending their kids to school or going to work, because it is a price that they are not able to afford. So I think that the way that we need to take care of that goes to the basic need, which is education, and creating opportunities in education for working families to get the skills necessary to just enter the industries that have jobs, especially in Rhode Island. So I have been able to not only provide support as a chair of the Senate Education Committee with scholarships and programs that support the healthcare system, for example, or support the child care early educators, or making sure that people don't choose between going to work at McDonald's. Instead, they go to the care economy, because that's what Rhode Islanders need, and that's what I will bring to Congress.
Walter Burbrick.
My number one priority as your representative in Congress is to build a strong middle class and a lower cost for hardworking Rhode Islanders. From Woonsocket all the way to Jamestown, that's one of the biggest things that I'm hearing from folks saying, I'm running for the older woman in East Providence who can't decide whether or not she should put food on the table or pay for prescription drugs. For the younger woman who had to resign and quit her job because of the child care cost more than what she took home every week. I'm running for the senior that I met in Smithfield just last week who has to travel over an hour to pay for his hearing aid at full price, right? And so, look, we need to, number one, tackle inflation. Number two, we need to prevent price gouging from big corporations. We need to create the opportunity for Rhode Islanders to have capital to start and grow and leverage your own small businesses. We need to create red tape, and we need to, and I'm going to focus on pushing federal dollars down to the local level so that we can build affordable homes quick, so that we can repair our crumbling infrastructure and invest in workforce development, because if we want to build the next generation submarine, the next generation windmill, and the next generation semiconductor, then we need the workforce.
And the next question will be first to Ms. Cano. If elected to this office, what is the first earmark that you will seek from the federal pork barrel?
That is an amazing question. I do believe that the earmarks need to do, and especially in this position, to help people directly. I would think that one of the earmarks that we could bring into Rhode Island is to make sure that we invest in infrastructure for climate resiliency. Our roads are turning into rivers every time that we have a storm. Every time that I go to Barrington, I talk to constituents there, they're really concerned about a bridge that connects two sides of the city because there is no infrastructure and dollars that come into making sure that we take care of our resiliency in climate right now. So that would be the first earmark that I would actually look for to make sure that infrastructure dollars to municipalities in Rhode Island to take care of all the needs of our communities.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson, first earmark and why?
I think affordable housing in our urban core in downtown Providence, maybe even something to do with the Superman building if it becomes feasible. So some way to reinvigorate and make more vital downtown Providence with more life, more vitality, more families, working families who can afford to live there and spend their money there and bring vitality back to the city.
Would this Superman building project have to be deeply affordable for you to ask for an earmark for it?
Oh, I think that's right. At least part of it would have to be deeply affordable because, I think we have enough luxury apartments in the world right now.
How affordable?
I don't know, I wouldn't put a number on it, but I'd say it should be, the majority of people who live there should be working families.
Mr. Amo, your first earmark and why?
It's actually not too far from my friend Don. I actually spent the afternoon at Crossroads today, and they are actually pursuing some really transformative projects that will help especially the folks who are short-term homeless. I think it's really essential that as people get into the system that we find some shelter for them and then get them permanent housing. And so I would pursue support of our great social service agencies like Crossroads for housing for people who are in transition and need the help.
Where should those shelters be located?
I think we have to work with communities. It is not the sort of decision that should be done sort of haphazardly and in isolation. Look, there's a lot of NIMBYism as it gets to these issues, and ultimately you have to work with each community on their needs and not force things. But you should also recognize that we're all in this together. We all have to pull together to take care of the people who are in need in our communities, and I'll work to do that as a congressperson.
And Senator Cano, 30 seconds on that.
So as a member of the General Assembly, we already have tons of dollars in Rhode Island through the ARPA dollars to tackle the affordable housing crisis here. The problem is that we need to implement those dollars. So I do believe that my colleagues here haven't really followed the dollars that are already in Rhode Island. I want to make sure that we know that we just need to act on it. The dollars are already in Rhode Island. We need to make sure that we start building homes for Rhode Islanders right now.
Mr. Burbrick, your first earmark and why?
Housing, because we have a national housing crisis here in America and right here in Rhode Island. The average American spends over 50% of their paycheck on housing, right? The cost of rent, the cost of our mortgages, they're out of control. And that's why, as your representative in Congress, and I've been clear about this from the very beginning, in wanting to serve and eventually chair on the subcommittee on housing, to provide real leadership and bring resources down to the local level across our country and right here in our community. And there's a number of different things that I think we can do. Number one, we can make one of the biggest single investments in housing in our nation's history. Number two, provide low-income housing credits for folks. Incentivize the private sector to build and build quickly. And number four, we need to have a better understanding of the scale and scope of the problem. And one of the things that I've called for recently is creating a national housing loss rate comparable to the national unemployment rate, so that we really understand the delta and understand what we're losing and how much we need to gain, and keeping our local our officials, our elected officials, accountable.
Thank you. And Ms. Beauty, your first earmark.
My concern is really when I talk to folks, I spent a lot of time today at the Lincoln Senior Center, and talking to some of the families there, the cost of being able to care for a loved one, and then the cost to be able to find housing for someone who's elderly. And then there's the long list in order to be able to get housing for someone who's elderly. And so really trying to invest in those communities who are already providing care for their loved ones. And so providing those dollars as a source of comfort and relief, because prescription drug costs are high, being able to sustain it with food, shelter, electricity. I mean, we can go on with how unfortunate and dire that the circumstances truly are. And I think it also covers a piece of the housing element, because being able to house and shelter your loved one, an elderly person, and I want them to make sure that they have the option to stay in their own homes is also imperative. But I think that would be my first of many.
Thank you. Ian.
It appears that most candidates in CD1 support a federal ban on assault-style rifles, but most gun-related murders take place with handguns. Nowadays, there's a device called a sear that can be created on a digital printer or purchased for short money, and that makes a pistol fire akin to a machine gun. So let's start with Walter Burbrick. What would you do about the scourge of handgun violence?
Yeah, nothing kills our kids more in this country than gun violence. More than cancer, more than anything. And as a veteran, I understand the responsibilities that come with firing firearms, both handguns and assault weapons. And I also understand firsthand the consequences of these weapons. And I believe that weapons of war belong on our battlefield and not on our streets. And so that's why I'm laser focused, and I'm proud to have been supported by Moms Demand Action. Because I will not stop fighting until we pass common sense gun legislation that does three things: provides comprehensive background checks and red flag laws to keep guns out of the hands of those who shouldn't have them. Number two, license, registration, proof of insurance, and making sure that you have to do training and pass a health screening. And number three, and most importantly, ban assault weapons once and for all.
Stephanie Beauty, how about you?
So I think one of the disadvantages with the government when you elect more politicians is not really seeing how advancing technology has become. And you can do anything in your basement, to be quite honest, or in your garage, or in your mom's attic. And so with the digitizing and being able to create firearms at a moment's notice, I think it's really imperative that we have someone that can kind of look towards the future and project out what are some of the issues that we can have. And one of the things that, as you mentioned, that we all agree on banning assault weapons, but part of my model that I want to follow after is with Japan, is to make sure that there's mental health checks as well prior to owning a particular firearm, any firearm in fact, that there's 90% accuracy in being able to shoot a firearm, and then also that there are criminal penalties, so you understand literally the life that you are taking or that you have the potential to take and the severity of that issue. And so that is my response.
Gabe Amo, your approach on handgun violence.
Yeah, one of the most difficult parts of my job at the White House as the liaison to mayors across the country was calling communities after incidents of gun violence where handguns were often responsible. It wasn't always assault weapons. And you know, a lot of the things that I think about are how do we make sure to deploy the assets that we have in our communities to reduce violence as a whole. So I look at things like the Nonviolence Institute in Providence and the model of community violence intervention, funding what we describe as violence interrupters to help in communities to squash what might be local conflicts that sometimes spin out of control. I would also work to create more opportunities for youth. I think sometimes, you know, violence happens occasionally because, you know, young people get caught in a trap, get caught in a cycle, and a lot of those handgun incidents are evidence of that. But for the 3D printing of guns, I would make sure that we have strong federal offenses for using a 3D printer to create a handgun. Work that has started, but we need to make sure that we're enforcing.
Thank you. Don Carlson.
Yeah, I'm also proud to be endorsed by Moms Demand. And, you know, in the first week of this campaign, I had a close call with this that really underscores your question, Ian, because my daughter was in an active shooter incident involving a handgun, a Ruger 9mm pistol at her college. It was a college party where a brawl broke out, and one guy got a bottle broken over his head, and because he had a gun, he pulled out that gun and started firing into the crowd. And some of you may have seen my TV commercial about that, which underscores it pretty well. It was a tough night in our home, trying to figure out what was going on. The communication system broke down, as it often does. And the fact that a gun was present turned a bad brawl into a potentially lethal incident. Now, no one got killed that night, but the pictures of the blood-spattered walls were all over the place. Kids were sending pictures back and forth. There was a lot of panic. So that one hit close to home. I think it's time to end this, and it's time to pass common sense gun laws that stop this, that restore liability for gun manufacturers, and that lift the federal ban on research of guns as a public health menace so that we can figure out what we can do to end this. Other countries have done this, we can do it too.
Sandra Cano.
So gun violence affects me directly. I came from Colombia under political asylum because my dad got kidnapped there. So I know the suffering that families go when gun violence really exists and affects regular families. I would say that as a state legislator, I have already stand strongly on gun safety reform here in Rhode Island. We need to do way more, but we have done legislation already with Moms Demand Action, Rhode Island Coalition Against Violence, the Non-Violence Institute, all together working to get common sense gun safety legislation to protect our communities. So I do believe that Gabe is right. We need to invest in programs and partnerships with those organizations that provide support to our youth and our communities that really need the support of people that really is spreading peace and tactics instead of having conflict arising in communities. And lastly, mental health support, I think, is also very important.
Thank you.
Yes.
And one more, we'll go to 45 seconds for these answers to move through it. Former Rep. Jim Langevin was extremely critical of President Biden for removing troops from Afghanistan when he did, and the nature of the withdrawal. Do you think that the president was right to pull troops out when he did after 2 decades? We'll go first to Don Carlson.
Yes, I do. It's never easy to end a war, and the 2 wars that we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan were becoming forever wars that put a tremendous drain on our resources as a country, and even worse, put our people in harm's way, caused a lot of death and a lot of suffering in that part of the world. So President Biden promised to end those wars, and he did. And he withdrew our troops from Afghanistan in the best way that we could do it at that time. Sure, maybe it wasn't flawless, maybe it could have been executed better, but that's 2020 hindsight from a Monday morning quarterback. And I feel like his commitment to fulfill his promise was really important, and he followed through on it, and he got the job done. So we no longer are in that war, and that's a blessing for us and a blessing for Afghanistan and for the world.
Sandra Cano, the pullout was described as a disaster. Do you think it was still right to do it?
Absolutely, I think so. I support President Biden's retrieval of the troops. I think that we fought really hard and support Afghanistan at that time, and it was the right time for us to bring our troops home, and that's why we are no longer in that war. So I supported his decision.
Should we have left sooner?
Probably.
Mr. Burbrick, next. What do you think about the way the Afghanistan withdrawal went?
Well, that's a different question.
Well, sorry, was he right to, was the president right to pull out?
So I agree that I agree in pulling out. I don't agree in the way in which he did it. It wasn't strategic, it wasn't smart. We did it in months where the fighting is high, and we left behind a lot of really good people that worked with us, and we turned our back on them. And we have an obligation to make sure that we can do all that we can, to open our home to them if in the case that they're looking for asylum here. But it is important that we end those endless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I spent 10 years in the Navy as an intelligence officer supporting folks on the ground over in Iraq and Afghanistan, and my brother spent 2 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and it's important that we wrap those wars up and now focus on the new threat and the emerging threat, both with China and the most urgent one with Russia.
Thank you, that's time. And Stephanie Beauty, what do you think about the timing of the withdrawal? Was it too soon or not soon enough?
So I disagree with Carlson and Cano. I think that it was irresponsibly done. We have actually a large Afghani population here in Rhode Island that we're sheltering. I was at the refugee center that is owned and operated by Dr. Omar Ba, and talking to one of the folks who survived that. He was able to leave because he was with the soldier at the time, but his family is there. And his family is literally in jeopardy because of the Taliban, just trying to target anyone who was there as an aid to our Rhode Islanders and to our U.S. Military. And I think it's unfortunate, and it's mainly because when you have folks in positions that make rush to judgment decisions because of political aspirations and want to kind of check off a box and not really be strategic about the ripple effect. And so that is disappointing, and I don't think he did it well. Should we have left before that? Yes, within a strategic manner that we should have. Should we have been there before to begin with? No.
Thank you. And Gabe Amo, what do you think? Did we leave too soon, too hastily, or not soon enough?
I think we probably should have left sooner, and I know the appearances on on TV showed a withdrawal that did not look organized. And I don't have full knowledge of the intelligence that drove those decisions, but I will say it was time for that war to end. When I served in the White House as a liaison to cities and mayors across this country, one of the roles I played was calling mayors across this country, asking them to be home to Afghans who were coming over from their homeland to start anew here. And seeing what they've been able to achieve in cities across America is a testament to the resilience of the people, and I hope that we can help as many of their families as possible.
Thank you.
All right. I just want to take a moment here, a quick break, just to remind the folks who are listening or watching at home that you are listening to a special live broadcast and digital stream of our 2023 Special Election Forum, a partnership between the Providence Journal, the Public's Radio, Rhode Island PBS, and Rhode Island College. We are broadcasting live from Rhode Island College on 89.3 FM and streaming at theprovidencejournal.com. Now, let's go to the fun part. We go to the rapid fire segment. We are looking for very brief answers, please. One-word answers, yes or no. In many cases, you have a limited amount of time. I'm going to turn it over now. Patrick will kick us off with the first question.
All right, and I'll bring some back from the first hour, some new. We'll start off down at the far end. Gabe Amo, should we ban gas stoves in new houses?
No.
Stephanie Beauty.
No.
Walter Burbrick.
No.
Sandra Cano.
No.
Don
No, I'll make it
Carlson.
unanimous, no.
Ranked choice, and then reverse order. Don Carlson, ranked choice voting. Would it be better if we were using that for this race? That
Oh,
system?
boy, I think so. I asked the speaker to do it. I called him up one day and asked him if we could do it as an experimental basis in this election, because it's a one-off, right?
What did he
So you
say?
can only screw up one
Quickly,
thing.
what did he say?
He said, no way. It's a short conversation.
Sandra Cano.
I think it's a perfect example with 12 candidates that ranked choice would have been helpful in this election.
Walter Burbrick.
I think as a state, we should certainly give it some serious thought.
Is that yes or no? Yeah, yes, why not? Stephanie Beauty.
That answer. How do I follow that? I think that we need to pass it. I believe that there's legislation there, and so with all the endorsements and all of that, hopefully everyone can get together and pass it.
And Gabe Amo.
Yes, I'm so glad that there are people mobilizing on this topic, and let's get it done.
And heading back the other way, should all student debt be canceled for all borrowers who have student debt? Yes or no? Gabe Amo.
No, I don't think all student debt. I do think that there are certain fields, whether it's teaching, other critical industries, absolve all of it, and then we need to forgive as much as possible.
Lightning round, lightning round.
Yes, oh,
Stephanie Beauty.
I would say yes, how to pay for it, remove the tax breaks for fossil fuel industry, so that way you can pay that. So that is my
Walter
answer.
Burbrick.
No, we need to stop putting a Band-Aid on this problem and get down to the root of the problem, and that's the control, that's the price of education. We need to put, I think we need to put a cap on it. Don't know what the number is, but we need to think hard about it.
Sandra Cano.
No, and I think I need to agree with Walter. We need to make sure that education is affordable for all Americans, regardless of where they come from, zip code. And so I'm happy that I've been working on those policies here in Rhode Island.
And Don Carlson.
Total forgiveness for people willing to dedicate their lives and careers to the serving and helping professions that are underserved right now, nursing, teaching, all kinds of service.
What
in
about the
community.
99% of Americans who aren't in public service?
Not 99%. There are a lot of people out there who are teachers and nurses and firemen and all kinds of folks.
It's
A
99.
broad definition of public service, especially in areas where we have current shortages. It's going to cost a lot of money to forgive student debt. We should get some
And
bang
the-
for our buck.
We've got to move
Lightning
along.
round,
go ahead.
moving on to
Sorry.
Ian.
Don Carlson, do you support reducing the voting age to 16?
No, I do not.
Sandra Cano.
No.
Walter Burbrick.
No.
Stephanie Beauty.
Yes, they should have a say in what decisions are made in their school, absolutely.
Gabe Amo.
No.
Gabe Amo, what's the last book that you've read?
Ooh, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Stephanie Beauty.
Am I allowed to say it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, are you?
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Whoa!
Oh, she said it.
Okay.
You said I could say it.
I didn't know what the title was. Walter Burbrick.
This is an easy one for me because it gives me inspiration, and that's the book I helped lead author, the Newport Manual on Arctic Security, which you can find on Amazon right now.
Sandra Cano.
So I just read it last night, The Three Little Pigs. No, in all seriousness. In all seriousness, Viola Davis' memoir, Finding Me.
Don Carlson.
So the last book you read was the book you wrote? Is that what you?
100%.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I got a copy for you, too.
I read Bill McKibben's book. It's a remarkable book called The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon about the changes in our society over the course of our lifetime because we're the exact same age. Fascinating book.
Don Carlson, should the United States provide F-16 fighters to Ukraine right now?
I'd want a national security opinion on that as to whether it's going to be stabilizing or destabilizing.
Sandra Cano.
I agree. I think that we need more information about that.
Walter Burbrick.
I've got a national security opinion for you.
Good.
So the answer is yes, because they need the capabilities to maintain air power so that they can achieve the conditions on the ground.
Stephanie Beauty.
Well, I will refer to the national security expert here, and I will second that.
Gabe Amo.
From what I've read, but I'm just going to plus one on Walter as well.
Before we go back to Patrick, Gabe Amo, what letter grade would you give to Governor McKee for his job performance?
I think it's very much an incomplete. He's in the middle of the work. I think that's a reflective decision. There's a whole lot to get done, and when I get to Congress, I look forward to working with him to get those things done with help from the federal government.
Stephanie Beauty.
I don't think it's fair. I mean, to be quite honest, he hasn't really had a full-time lieutenant governor, so it wouldn't be fair.
Walter Burbrick.
It's hard for me to put a letter grade on it because of the housing problem, the education problem, the infrastructure problem. We've got a lot of problems. They still haven't been solved, but I think we're making progress and I look forward to hopefully working with them.
Sandra Cano.
So work in progress. I think Governor McKee hasn't completed his job, so I will be looking forward to continue working as a state legislator or as a member of Congress. I think that is important.
Don Carlson.
Definitely a work in progress. I'm seeing signs that the governor is stepping up his leadership on really trying to take leadership of the renewable wind industry and really trying to make Rhode Island a better business climate for new businesses to start up and grow in the state.
Don Carlson, should the U.S. ban TikTok?
That's a national security question. So it's not a, I don't think there's anything wrong with TikTok in particular, although some people would say on young minds it can be deleterious. But at the same time, I think the question is one that I'd like the Pentagon to answer in terms of China's ability to gain insights into our society.
Do you think yes or no? You had to say now.
So right now I'm going to say no because I don't have the information to say yes.
Sandra,
but I'm open to it.
So I think that we need to make sure that we have information about our data protection, especially through apps like that. So I would say no for now, but I would look forward to get more information about that.
Walter Burbrick.
Yeah, it should be on the table for sure, but I think we need to better understand the economic, political, social security implications of doing so.
Stephanie Beauty, TikTok.
So I think we do. It's owned by China. The way that folks provide information, outsource information, they can feed information to us. And so as someone with a technical background, I would absolutely ban TikTok.
And Gabe Amo.
I need to know more. I'm glad that the voter age isn't 16, so I know a lot of their users are young. But no, seriously, I don't think I'd ban it now, but I would look hard at that as an option.
And to you, Gabe, should the U.S. Pursue more nuclear power or less in its decarbonization effort?
I think we have to be very careful. I would stay where we are.
Stephanie Beauty?
No, I don't think we should push some more.
Walter Burbrick.
We need to have a clean energy economy, diversify our clean energy, which includes nuclear.
Sandra Cano.
Let's stay where we are. Clean economy is important. So
yes.
Right now, stay where we are.
Same. And
the Navy has had scores of nuclear reactors in safe operation for scores of years. I think we have a lot to learn about cool new things in decentralized nuclear power that's much smaller scale and much safer.
And if elected, what's the first foreign country that you would want to visit in your official capacity? Don Carlson.
So I promised my mom that we would go to the Azores because we discovered a few months ago, actually in the first month of the campaign, that we're Portuguese. We did some DNA testing and discovered we're Portuguese. So her father actually came from the Azores, so I promised her to take her there.
Sandra Cano, what country?
I would love to go to Ukraine, to be honest with you, just to see how things are going there. So if I have the opportunity, I would definitely go there.
Walter Burbrick.
I've had the opportunity to travel across the world, India to Iceland to Greenland. But right now, I'd want to go to Russia to sit down with Putin and the rest of the folks and try to end this war.
Stephanie Beauty.
You took my answer. I thought I was the toughest one on the stage here. I as well have traveled a great deal, and one of the places I was actually supposed to go this summer was to go to Israel with Avi Navel to talk about the technology and the work that they're doing there.
So Israel. And Gabe Amo.
I would say a country in West Africa, maybe Ghana.
I've been. It's nice, Gabe. You should go.
I've been twice. It's where my father was born, but in fact, I think as we look at our strategic positioning, the continent of Africa is incredibly important.
All right, we're short on time here, so a few more yes or no, please, and then we go to closing statements. Gabe Amo, is there any chance that you will drop out before September 5th and throw your support to a different candidate?
Absolutely not.
Stephanie Beauty, any chance of that for you?
Oh, no.
Walter Burbrick?
No, sir.
Sandra Cano?
We're building momentum now.
Don Carlson?
On the march, no way.
Don Carlson, do you support statehood for Washington, D.C.?
I do. It's about time. They're American citizens. They should have a vote.
Sandra Cano?
I agree.
Walter Burbrick?
Yes, and Puerto Rico.
Stephanie Beauty?
Yes, and Puerto Rico.
Gabe Amo?
D.C. and Puerto Rico, too.
Me too, Puerto Rico too.
Gabe Amo, did the Biden administration move too slowly in responding to inflation?
No, I don't think so. There were a lot of different tactics used, but we had the COVID-19 pandemic. We had a slowdown in our supply chain, and so I don't think they
Thank you.
moved too slow.
Stephanie Beauty?
I do. I think it was very disorganized, and we're still feeling it.
Walter Burbrick?
Yes, and we still haven't tackled inflation totally, and we need to continue working on it.
Sandra Cano?
I think we need to do better about price gouging and making sure that our families really don't get the effects of the inflation. Yes.
Don Carlson?
Proof's in the pudding. We have a soft landing. Inflation is really back under control if you're paying attention. So just right.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to closing statements from the candidates. You've got 1 minute that we're timing closely. Let's start with Don Carlson. Your closing statement, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. You have a big choice ahead of you, and I think the way to think about that choice is which of those of us up on the stage, including the panel that was here before, best aligns with your values and also best aligns with your vision for the future of Rhode Island, and who can make you proud to represent you. So what distinguishes me from the rest of the candidates is really my history and my qualifications. I'm the only one of us that's actually served in the House of Representatives, the job we're interviewing for. And I did that at a very young age, but I was the legislative director and chief counsel for Joseph P. Kennedy II for his first 2 terms in Congress. We got some great laws passed, including laws on affordable housing to strengthen the Community Reinvestment Act and make it part of a bank's examination, and even the Rails to Trails legislation, which dedicated a portion of the highway fund every year to converting old railway lines to bike paths. So thanks. I enjoy that every time I ride up and down the East Bay bike path. The other thing is to remember that I'm not beholden to anyone in this race. I haven't taken any money from super PACs. I haven't taken any money from folks that are questionable. And what I've done is instead I've raised half the money from myself and half from others.
Sandra Cano, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
I'm the only candidate in this race that have the legislative experience from the school committee to the city council to the state senate as current chair of the Senate Education Committee. And it's going to take experience and also legislative track record to represent the people of Rhode Island well in Washington, D.C. I think that coming from Colombia under political asylum, I don't take our democracy for granted. This is the greatest democracy in the world, and it is a democracy that is very divided right now. So it's going to take someone that is good about building coalitions from people around the state, but also in Washington, D.C. I always say I debate the issues, but not the people. And I am ready to be that representative for Rhode Island, to do policies that work for people and the working families. I care about helping people. I love to make policy work for Rhode Islanders, and I hope that I can transfer those experiences that I have at the state level to the federal
That's time.
government.
Thank you. Walter Burbrick, you have 1 minute for your close.
Look, we are at a defining moment in our nation's history. We have an economy that doesn't work for working people. Women across our country have lost their fundamental right to choose. Our kids and communities are being engulfed by gun violence. Our planet is in peril, and most importantly, Rhode Islanders, like so many Americans, have lost trust in government. That's why I'm in this race, and that's why I resigned from 15 years of federal service without a paycheck, without personal wealth, without political connections, without super PAC money, because I fundamentally believe that I have an obligation to continue serving and fighting for you. And I'm going to do that the only way I know how, by listening, by always being honest with you and having honest conversations, and by fighting for you whether you voted for me or not. And so I'm Walter Burbrick, and I'm asking for your vote on September 5th.
Thank you for a timely response. And Stephanie Beauty, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
I grew up in a family that understood the value of service to our communities. My mom is still a CNA to this day, and she's been a CNA for 33 years. I have family who've gone to West Point, who was a Green Beret, who serve. I have family who are actively serving in the Navy. And when I look at the state of our country, to be quite honest, the government hasn't worked for us. It hasn't worked for everyone. And we look at the state of the education here in Rhode Island, housing that we're talking about, food, I mean, the cost of gas, everything that you can name of, we're not going to fix it by sending the same people to office. And if we're gonna be even more honest, I don't think that we need more politicians in DC. That's part of the problem that we have here. So that is my distinguishing key attribute. If it were working, I would continue my technical job that I've been doing. I've done cyber risk and cybersecurity and mobile app development and API integrations. I would continue to do that. But we won't fix things by allowing broken systems to continue. So today I'm asking for your vote and to vote for beauty. Thank you so much.
Gabe Amo, 1 minute for your closing statement.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And it's clear there is so much at stake in this election, from tackling the climate crisis, to protecting reproductive freedom, to investing in and strengthening Social Security, to dealing with gun violence. There is so much that we have to do. And we can't just hope that folks are going to be able to hit the ground running. It is an honor to be a candidate for Congress. An honor to be a son of 2 West African immigrants who grew up in Pawtucket and got to work for 2 presidents at the White House. And in those roles, I was responsible for representing the president when communities were in their time of need. And right now, I know that Rhode Islanders deserve a congressperson who can hit the ground running and use their experience to be effective from day one. And that's why I'm humbly asking for your support. I encourage you to take a look at my website, see what we offer, and I'm hopeful that we will do great together.
And on that, we bring it to an end. And as we wrap up, I want to thank our candidates, Don Carlson, Sandra Cano, Walter Burbrick, Stephanie Beauty, and Gabe Amo. Round of applause. And thank you again to our audience, especially to our community members who submitted questions for tonight. Thanks again to you for listening to our candidate forum for Rhode Island's 2023 1st Congressional District Special Election. This has been a production of the Public's Radio, the Providence Journal, Rhode Island PBS, and Rhode Island College. Our panelists again were Patrick Anderson of the Providence Journal and Ian Donis of the Public's Radio. A few other folks I want to thank. Again, our technical directors are Michael Kane and Jonathan Rosa. Our stage director is Nate Halda. Our editors are Marie Valindo and Tyler Pellegrino. Our community producers are Will Richmond and Maddie Mott. Our producer is Brianna Medina. Our chief content officer is Jan Boyd. Our directors are Sherry O'Rourke and Patty Federico. And our executive producer is Barbara Dury. I want to remind people, by the way, that Rhode Island PBS will post this forum on the Rhode Island PBS YouTube channel tomorrow if you want to go back and watch it. Thanks again for being here. I'm Luis Hernandez. Have a wonderful evening.